All right, get ready, because today we're going deep into a world we don't often think about: the microscopic world of microbes. The ones that usually make the headlines for making us sick.
You're right, but that's just one tiny part of their story.
Exactly. So in this deep dive, we're going to flip the script and uncover their hidden talents.
We'll reveal how these little organisms, the bacteria, fungi, viruses, even prions, are actually essential allies to human life.
It's funny, we usually only see them under a microscope, but really, they're everywhere.
Oh yeah, from the soil and air to the most extreme environments like geysers, even under layers of snow.
Can you imagine if we could see them all with the naked eye? It'd be a whole other universe just bustling around us.
Absolutely, and the crazy thing is, they're contributing to human welfare in ways we might not even realize.
So let's break it down. How are they working these wonders in our homes, our industries, heck, even in managing waste and boosting agriculture?
Okay, well, let's start with something we all know and love: food.
Yeah, who doesn't love a good bowl of yogurt or a slice of cheesy pizza?
I know, right? So let's think about, what role do microbes play in creating these culinary delights? Let's begin with, let's say, making curd for milk.
Okay, curd?
It's all thanks to these microscopic warriors called lactic acid bacteria, or LB.
LB, okay.
Yeah, so they feed on the lactose, that's the milk sugar, and as they do, they produce lactic acid. That's what gives curd its tangy flavor and helps it coagulate.
Aha, so that's how we get that creamy texture.
Yeah.
But I've always heard yogurt is good for gut health.
Oh, absolutely, you're right.
Is that also thanks to LB?
You're spot on. They're essential for a healthy gut microbiome, which helps with digestion and just overall gut health. And you know what else? During this whole fermentation process, LB actually break down the milk proteins, which makes the curd easier to digest. And guess what? It also ups its vitamin B12 content.
Hold on, vitamin B12. I thought we mainly get that from meat and stuff, right?
That's right, but these tiny bacteria are creating it right there in our food.
That's amazing. I mean, B12 is crucial for energy and our nerves. These little factories are just churning it out.
I know, it's wild, right?
It really is. Okay, so a lab are doing a lot, but it's not just curd, is it? What about other fermented foods, like dosa, isla, even bread?
Oh yeah, those are all part of this microbial magic show too. They rely on the same principle of fermentation, but sometimes different actors, different bacteria.
Okay, so like what? What are some of these other microbes up to?
Well, for instance, in dosa and idly, the bacteria they use produces carbon dioxide. That's what gives it that lovely light and airy texture.
Ah, that explains the fluffiness.
Exactly. And then for bread, it's yeast. Right. It's creating those satisfying air pockets that make a good loaf. But you know what I've always wondered? Where do all these fermentation bacteria come from? They just magically appear in our kitchens.
That's a good question. I never actually thought about that.
Oh,
I guess
yeah.
they're just naturally present in the environment somehow.
You got it. They find their way into our food, and different cultures have really mastered the art of, harnessing these microbes to create all kinds of unique fermented foods.
Right, like what about toddy in South India? Have you ever heard of that?
Of course. Or fermented fish and bamboo shoots in other parts of the world. It's amazing how humans across the globe have learned to work with these tiny organisms.
Right. It really shows you the diversity of the microbial world
For sure.
and how humans have adapted to utilize it. Okay, but I got to ask about cheese. You can't talk about fermented foods without cheese.
Yeah.
What makes each cheese so different? The flavors, the textures.
Well, it's all about the microbes again. Different bacteria and fungi give each cheese its own personality, you could say. Like, think about those big holes in Swiss cheese.
Oh yeah, those are iconic.
Well, that's thanks to bacteria that produce a lot of carbon dioxide during fermentation, which creates those air pockets.
So it's all about the gas. But what about blue cheese? That sharp flavor, the color.
That one's a bit different. Cheeses like Roquefort, they use specific fungi for ripening. That gives them that characteristic blue veining and that pungent flavor.
So microbes are basically culinary alchemists.
Yeah. Transforming basic ingredients into these incredibly complex and flavorful foods.
But they're not just our little kitchen helpers,
Oh,
right?
no, definitely not.
I mean, I've heard they're basically industrial powerhouses too.
Absolutely. From, yogurt production on a huge scale with those gut-friendly LA we talked about, to making alcoholic beverages,
Yeah.
even producing those life-saving antibiotics. Microbes are working hard across industries.
I'm picturing these massive vats just teeming with microbes hard at work. It's like a scene from a sci-fi movie. What's it like inside these microbial factories?
Well, that all happens in these massive vessels called fermenters.
Okay,
They're designed to give microbes the perfect environment to thrive and do their thing.
got it. So give us an example. How do they work?
Well, let's take alcoholic beverages. So we use
Right.
Saccharomyces cerevisiae, which is also known as brewer's yeast, to ferment sugars from, say, malted cereals or fruit juices to produce ethanol. Does that ring a bell?
Wait, isn't that the same yeast we use for bread?
It is. It just shows you how a single species can have so many different applications.
So this one little yeast is a real multitasker. But, talking about groundbreaking discoveries, we can't forget antibiotics. Those have been absolute game changers in fighting bacterial infections, haven't they?
Oh, without a doubt. The discovery of antibiotics revolutionized medicine. I mean, before penicillin, infections that are treatable today were often fatal.
Yeah, penicillin's discovery is an amazing story.
It really is.
I mean, a total accident in the lab that changed the course of history.
And its impact during World War II, preventing infections in soldiers.
And of course, the Nobel Prize for Fleming, the whole thing is just legendary.
Yeah, but that was just the beginning, right? There's tons of antibiotics out there now, and they all have a unique origin story, I'm guessing.
That's right, they do. For example, streptomycin. It's effective against tuberculosis, and it comes from the bacteria Streptomyces griseus. It just goes to show the diversity of the microbial world and the potential they have to create these really potent, life-saving substances. I know, it really makes you wonder how many more are out there waiting to be discovered.
It does.
But antibiotics are just one example of their contribution to human welfare. What other industries are they shaking up?
Well, for one, microbes are also essential for producing certain chemicals and enzymes that we use all the time. Take citric acid, for example.
Citric acid.
Yeah, it's that common flavoring and preservative we see in so many things. And guess what? It's produced commercially using a fungus called Aspergillus niger.
Wow, so even the tangy kick in our lemonade is all thanks to microbes.
That's right.
That's pretty wild. What else?
Well, what about acetic acid, the main ingredient in vinegar? It's produced by the bacteria Acetobacter aceti through fermenting ethanol.
Okay, so microbes are responsible for our vinegar too.
Exactly, and there are so many others. Butyric acid, lactic acid, all with their own microbial producers. It's incredible.
It's like they're these tiny chemical factories, just pumping out all these important compounds for all these everyday products. And now they're also used for enzymes, aren't they? Those are like the protein workhorses in so many industries.
You're right. Enzymes are essentially biological catalysts that speed up chemical reactions, and microbes are pros at making them.
Okay, I need an example. How are enzymes used in everyday life?
Well, think about those licases they put in laundry detergents, the ones that break down grease stains. Those come from microbes.
So even those tough stains don't stand a chance against microbial power. What about those perfectly clear fruit juices you get at the store?
Good point. You know those look nothing like the juice I make at home.
Exactly. Is there some kind of microbial secret behind that?
You know it. They use enzymes like pectinases and proteases to get that crystal clear look. And where do those enzymes come from? Microbes, of course.
That's amazing. Pectinases break down pectin, which is in the fruit cell walls, and proteases target proteins, which makes the juice clear, right?
You got it. It's remarkable how much we rely on these tiny helpers for products we often take for granted.
Speaking of enzymes, wasn't there a major breakthrough in medicine with an enzyme called streptokinase? Didn't it come from bacteria?
You're thinking of the clot buster they use to treat heart attack patients.
Yeah, that's it.
So streptokinase is produced by the bacteria Streptococcus, and it's this powerful enzyme that can dissolve blood clots, literally saving lives. And, thanks to genetic engineering, we can produce it even more efficiently now.
It's really amazing how we've learned to harness the power of these bacterial products for such important treatments. What other incredible medical applications have we found?
Oh, tons. A good example is cyclosporin A, a crucial immunosuppressant drug.
So that helps prevent organ rejection and transplants.
Exactly. And it's actually produced by a fungus called Trichoderma polysporum.
I know, right? It's amazing to think about. From cheese to life-saving drugs, they're everywhere.
I know. It makes you wonder what else they're capable of.
What other surprises do they have in store for us?
Well, think about this. Statins. Those drugs many people take to lower their cholesterol.
Yeah.
Those are actually made by a yeast called Monascus purpureus. They work by inhibiting a key enzyme involved in cholesterol production.
Wow, I had no idea. So even managing cholesterol involves a little microbial help. It's crazy how something so tiny can have such a massive impact on our health. But let's get real for a second. What about all the waste we generate? I mean, sewage treatment has to be a massive challenge, right?
Oh, absolutely, you're right. Dealing with that much sewage every day is a huge problem, and you guessed it, microbes are at the heart of the solution.
Okay, so how do they turn wastewater into something safe?
Well, it all starts at sewage treatment plants, or STPs for short. They use a combination of physical and biological processes, and it's in the biological processes where our little microbial friends really shine.
All right, so let's break down this microbial cleaning operation. Where does it all begin?
Well, the first step is called primary treatment, and it's all about removing large debris, solid waste, things like that.
So like a giant filter for all the obvious stuff.
You got it. Things like plastic, rags, grit, all the things that shouldn't be going down the drain in the first place.
So this removes most of the solid waste. But the water's still got a long way to go before it's clean, right?
You're right. The liquid part, we call it effluent, still has dissolved organic matter and potentially harmful microbes. That's where secondary treatment comes in, and that's where the microbes really take center stage.
Okay, time for the microbial superheroes to take over. So what happens in this stage?
So in secondary treatment, the effluent goes into large aeration tanks.
Aeration tanks, okay.
They're constantly agitated and aerated, so it creates the perfect environment for those aerobic bacteria to thrive.
So these are the oxygen-loving ones we talked about earlier.
I got it. And as they multiply, they break down the organic matter and form these, interesting structures called flocks.
Flocks. So what are those exactly? Like, are they little microbial cities?
Well, you can kind of think of them that way. They're these fluffy masses of bacteria and fungal filaments all tangled up together. And this network of flocks is what makes the breakdown of organic pollutants so efficient.
Okay, but how do they measure how well this microbial cleaning crew is doing?
We use something called BOD, which stands for biochemical oxygen demand.
BOD, okay.
Basically, it tells us how much oxygen the microbes are gobbling up as they break down the organic matter in the water.
So a high BOD means the water is pretty polluted, and the microbes are working hard to clean it up.
Exactly. And the aim of secondary treatment is to really bring that BOD down to make the water safe to release. And these hardworking microbes are the key to achieving that.
Okay, I'm following. So what happens after all that microbial activity in the aeration tanks?
The next step is the wastewater, which now has a much lower BOD, flows into a settling tank.
Settling tank. Oh.
Here, those bacterial flocks we talk about, they settle at the bottom, and that forms what we call activated sludge.
Activated sludge, that sounds important. What do they do with that?
Well, some of this activated sludge, which is full of those beneficial bacteria, is recycled back into the aeration tanks.
So we're basically reusing the workforce.
Exactly. Keeps the whole process going. But the rest of the activated sludge goes to anaerobic digesters, where a different type of bacteria takes over.
Anaerobic digesters. Okay, what are these bacteria doing?
These are anaerobic bacteria, which means they actually thrive in environments without oxygen.
So oxygen is like their kryptonite.
You could say that. They're essential because they break down the remaining organic matter in the sludge in a process we call anaerobic digestion.
Okay, so why do they need a different process for this? Why can't those oxygen-loving bacteria in the aeration tanks just do the whole job?
Well, anaerobic digestion has some advantages. For starters, it can handle the more complex organic materials that might give the aerobic bacteria trouble. And here's the amazing part, it generates biogas.
Biogas, isn't that a fuel source?
You got it.
So we're creating fuel from waste.
Precisely. Biogas is a mixture of gases, mostly methane, which is flammable, so it can be used as fuel for heating, cooking, even generating electricity.
It's amazing how these microbes are not only cleaning our wastewater, they're also helping us generate energy.
It really shows how powerful it can be to harness these natural processes.
Absolutely. Okay, so after all this, the wastewater is finally clean, right? Safe to release.
That's right. It's clean enough to go back into rivers or lakes. Sometimes they'll do an extra step called tertiary treatment to purify it even further. But the heavy lifting is done by those microbial buddies of ours.
I never realized how much goes on behind the scenes to make sure our wastewater is properly treated. It's a whole lot more complex and fascinating than I ever imagined.
It is, and microbes are really the unsung heroes of the whole process.
They really are.
What?
But you mentioned earlier that not all sewage gets treated, right?
That's right, and it's a big problem.
So what happens when untreated sewage ends up in our water systems?
It's definitely not a good thing. Untreated sewage can contaminate our rivers and lakes, which poses serious risks to human health and to the environment.
Yeah, it's not just about keeping things clean. It's about protecting public health and those precious water resources.
Exactly. It really is. It's all about protecting public health and those precious water resources.
Okay, so we've learned how microbes are used to clean up wastewater, but you also mentioned that they can produce fuel. Tell me more about that.
Sure. Remember those anaerobic bacteria that break down the sludge in the digesters? Well, those are called methanogens, and they're the ones producing methane as they munch on that sludge.
Methanogens. So they're literally creating methane as a byproduct of their digestion. It's like they're tiny little methane factories.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that these methanogens aren't just found in sewage treatment plants, they're also found in the rumen of cattle.
The rumen, that's part of a cow's stomach, right?
Got it. Cows are herbivores, so their diet is high in cellulose.
Cellulose, that's the tough fibrous material found in plant cell walls, right?
Right. Now, we humans, we can't digest cellulose, but those methanogens in the cow's rumen, they can.
So they break it down,
Yeah.
and methane is released as a byproduct.
Exactly.
So those cow burps we hear so much about, those are actually releasing methane produced by microbes. It's kind of funny when you think about it.
It is. But the methane released from cattle is a potent greenhouse gas, unfortunately.
So these methanogens are helping cows digest their food, but they're also contributing to climate change.
It's a complex situation for sure. It really highlights the interconnectedness of these biological processes.
It really does. Okay, so back to biogas. You mentioned that cow dung can be used to produce biogas in something called a biogas plant. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure, so biogas plants are designed to harness the methane-producing capabilities of methanogens. They take cow dung and mix it with water in a large container called a digester.
So it's like a specialized compost bin for cow dung.
You could think of it that way. The digester is kept airtight, so it maintains those oxygen-free conditions that the anaerobic bacteria need to thrive. As they break down the dung, they produce biogas, which is then collected and used as fuel.
It's amazing that something as simple as cow dung can be turned into a valuable energy source, and it's all thanks to these tiny microbes. It's like we're turning waste into a resource. Where did this technology come from?
The technology for biogas production has been around for a long time, but its development and refinement owe a lot to institutions like the Indian Agricultural Research Institute, IIRI, and the Khadi and Village Industries Commission, KVIC, in India.
So India has really been a leader in using microbes for practical purposes.
You're right, India has a long history of harnessing the power of microbes.
It's a great reminder that sometimes ancient practices, combined with modern science, can provide really sustainable solutions to modern problems.
I agree.
Okay, so we've explored the fascinating world of sewage treatment and biogas production. But let's shift gears and talk about another crucial aspect of agriculture: pest control.
Ah, yes, the eternal struggle between farmers and pests.
Exactly. And traditionally, chemical pesticides have been the go-to weapon in this battle. But we know those can have harmful effects on the environment and human health.
Right. They can be a double-edged sword, they might get rid of pests, but they can create a whole host of other problems. So finding alternatives is crucial.
What are some of the alternatives out there?
Well, one promising approach is biocontrol.
Biocontrol. So what's that all about?
Biocontrol is a more sustainable and environmentally friendly way to manage pests. It's all about using living organisms to control pest populations.
So instead of spraying synthetic chemicals, we're introducing other organisms to fight the pests.
Exactly. It's about harnessing nature's own checks and balances.
So what kinds of organisms are we talking about here?
There are a lot of options, from beneficial insects to microbes. For example, ladybugs, they're natural predators of aphids, and lacewings are great at controlling a variety of soft-bodied insects.
So we're essentially releasing a tiny army of beneficial insects into the fields to take care of the bad guys.
That's a great way to put it. And the great thing about these biocontrol agents is that they're often very specific, meaning they target only the pest species.
So they're like a precision strike against the pests, minimizing collateral damage to other beneficial insects.
Exactly. But microbes can play a big role in biocontrol too.
So how does that work? What kind of microbes are we talking about?
Well, one of the most well-known examples is the bacterium Bacillus thuringiensis, or Bootae for short.
Okay.
It's a naturally occurring soil bacterium that produces a toxin that's lethal to certain insects.
So how do they use it? Do they just spray the bacteria on crops?
They can apply it that way. There are formulations containing boot spores, and when these spores are ingested by susceptible insect larvae, they release the toxin in the gut, which kills the larvae.
Wow, so it's like a targeted attack that only affects the harmful insects.
That's right. And because it's so effective and specific, beet has become a very popular biocontrol agent worldwide. In fact, scientists have even developed genetically modified crops that contain the beet toxin gene.
Beet crops, like beet cotton.
Exactly. Beet cotton is a genetically modified variety that produces the beet toxin, making it resistant to certain insect pests. It's been widely adopted in several countries, including India, and it's significantly reduced the need for chemical pesticides.
It's like giving the plants their own built-in defense mechanisms.
hmm
That's pretty amazing. Are there any other microbes being used for biocontrol?
Oh, definitely. Another one is the fungus trichoderma.
Trichoderma, okay.
It's commonly found in soil, and it's a very effective biocontrol agent against various plant pathogens.
Plant pathogens, so those are the microbes that cause diseases in plants, right?
Right. And trichoderma can suppress their growth, which protects plants from those diseases.
So we have bacteria and fungi fighting the good fight against plant diseases. What about viruses? Can they be helpful in this context?
Believe it or not, they can. There's a group of viruses called baculoviruses that are specifically pathogenic to insects, and they're excellent candidates for biocontrol because they're highly specific and environmentally friendly.
Highly specific. So they only target certain types of insects.
Exactly. They don't harm beneficial insects, mammals, birds, fish, or plants, so they're a great tool for integrated pest management.
So it's like a targeted approach to pest control that minimizes the damage to the entire ecosystem.
That's the idea. It's really a fascinating example of how we can utilize viruses for good.
So it's not just about eliminating pests, it's about maintaining a healthy balance.
Exactly.
This is all so fascinating. But let's move on to another major challenge: feeding the world's growing population. I know chemical fertilizers have played a big role in boosting crop yields, but they also come with environmental baggage.
That's right. Overusing chemical fertilizers can lead to soil degradation, water pollution, and even contribute to climate change. That's why there's growing interest in biofertilizers, a more sustainable alternative.
Okay, biofertilizers. So we're talking about fertilizers that use living organisms.
Exactly. Biofertilizers are basically living organisms that enhance the nutrient quality of the soil.
I like that. So it's like having a team of microscopic gardeners working in the soil.
That's a great analogy.
So what kinds of organisms are we talking about here?
The stars of the biofertilizer world are bacteria, fungi, and cyanobacteria. You've probably heard of rhizobium bacteria, right? The ones that form those nodules on the roots of legume plants.
Rhizobium, yes.
Yeah.
Those are the nitrogen-fixing bacteria, right? The ones that work together with legumes to convert atmospheric nitrogen into a usable form for plants. It's a classic example of symbiosis.
That's right. But there are also free-living nitrogen-fixing bacteria, like Azospirillum and Azotobacter, that just live independently in the soil and contribute to the nitrogen content.
So we've got our nitrogen fixers. What about other essential nutrients? How do they get into the soil?
Well, that's where fungi come in, specifically mycorrhizal fungi.
Okay, mycorrhizal fungi. Tell me more about them.
They form a partnership with plant roots, extending their reach into the soil and increasing the surface area for nutrient absorption.
So it's like they're giving the plant roots a helping hand.
You got it. And they're really good at absorbing phosphorus, which is often a limiting nutrient for plants.
So it's a win-win for both the fungus and the plant. What does the fungus get out of it?
Well, the plant gives the fungus sugars, which provides the energy it needs to grow.
So it's all about cooperation.
It really is.
Okay, we've talked about bacteria and fungi, but what about cyanobacteria? I know they're photosynthetic, so how do they help with biofertilization?
Cyanobacteria, sometimes called blue-green algae, are really interesting. They can fix atmospheric nitrogen, just like those bacteria we talked about, and they're especially important in paddy fields, where they contribute to the nitrogen fertility of the soil.
So they're like little nitrogen factories working in the water.
Exactly. And they also add organic matter to the soil, which further enriches it.
This is great. It sounds like biofertilizers have a ton of potential to make agriculture more sustainable and reduce our dependence on those chemical fertilizers.
They do.
Are they already being used commercially? I mean, is this something farmers are actually using?
Yes, definitely. There are companies all over the world that produce and sell biofertilizers, and their use is becoming more and more widespread.
So farmers are recognizing the benefits of using them.
They are.
That's encouraging. It's great to see how microbes are playing such a crucial role in this move toward more sustainable agricultural practices. This has been such an eye-opening exploration into the world of microbes. It's amazing how much we rely on them.
It really is.
It's like they're working behind the scenes all the time, making sure everything runs smoothly. But there's one area we haven't talked about yet, their role in maintaining soil health.
That's right, and it's incredibly important. Soil is the foundation for all terrestrial life, and microbes are the unsung heroes working tirelessly beneath our feet to keep it healthy. That's right, and it's incredibly important. Soil is the foundation for all terrestrial life, and microbes are the unsung heroes working tirelessly beneath our feet to keep it healthy.
I know the soil is just teeming with life, but I have no idea what's actually happening down there. It's like a hidden universe beneath our feet.
You know, you're right. Just imagine, in a single teaspoon of healthy soil, there can be billions of microorganisms.
Wow, billions.
Billions. Bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, it's all happening down there. And they're all interacting in this complex web of relationships, doing all the essential work that keeps that soil ecosystem thriving.
Okay, so they're busy down there. What are they doing? How are they contributing to soil health?
Well, one of the most crucial roles is decomposition.
Decomposition, okay.
Yeah, so when plants and animals die, their remains are broken down by these microbes into simpler compounds, and that releases nutrients back into the soil.
So it's like nature's recycling system.
Exactly. Microbes are the ultimate recyclers. They make sure that those essential nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, the ones that are vital for plant growth, are constantly being reused and put back into the soil.
Okay, that makes sense. But I always thought that plants just got their nutrients directly from the soil. So why is decomposition so important?
Well, think of it this way. The soil itself only has a limited supply of nutrients. If you didn't have decomposition happening, those nutrients would get used up eventually, and the soil would become infertile. It wouldn't be able to support plant life anymore. Microbes are there to ensure that those essential nutrients are constantly replenished. They're like the guardians of the soil's nutrient bank, making sure there's always a steady supply for plants to grow.
Ah, so they're keeping the cycle going.
Exactly.
It's amazing how these tiny organisms have such a big impact. But their contribution isn't just about decomposition, right?
Right. They also play a vital role in soil structure.
Soil structure. I never really thought about soil having a structure. I thought it was just dirt.
Well, soil is much more than just dirt. It's got this specific structure,
Okay.
different sized particles, pore spaces, all that. And that structure is crucial for water infiltration, aeration, root growth, all the things you need for plants to grow properly.
So it's like the architecture of the soil, right?
Exactly. And microbes are essential for building and maintaining that architecture.
So how do they do that?
Well, some microbes produce substances that bind soil particles together, and that forms these things called aggregates.
Aggregates.
Yeah, you can think of them as like little clumps of soil held together by microbial glue.
So these aggregates, they help the soil hold water better.
Yes. And they improve soil porosity, which allows water and air to move more freely. That's what you want for those roots to really spread out and grow.
So not only are microbes providing nutrients, but they're also creating a good home for the plant roots.
Exactly. They're the landscape architects of the underground world.
This is all so fascinating. But are there any other roles microbes play in the soil?
Oh, there's so much more. Some produce growth-promoting substances, which give plants an extra boost. Others help defend against diseases, kind of like the plant's immune system. And some can even fix nitrogen from the atmosphere.
Nitrogen fixation, we've talked about that before, right?
Right.
The rhizobium bacteria in legume roots.
Exactly. Those are a great example of a symbiotic relationship where both bacteria and the plant benefit. The bacteria provide nitrogen to the plant, and the plant provides sugars to the bacteria.
Right, it's a win-win situation. But those aren't the only nitrogen-fixing microbes in the soil, are they?
No, not at all. You've also got those free-living nitrogen fixers.
Oh, right.
Bacteria like Azospirillum and Azotobacter live freely in the soil, and they also contribute to its nitrogen content. It's really amazing how they all work together to keep things fertile.
Yeah, it really is. It's like this incredible, intricate system. But are there any threats to this delicate balance in the soil? I mean, can human activities impact soil health?
Sadly, the answer is yes. Things like intensive agriculture, deforestation, pollution, they can all disrupt the soil ecosystem.
So how do those activities actually harm the soil and its microbial inhabitants?
Well, intensive agriculture, for example, it often involves using a lot of chemical fertilizers and pesticides. And while those might boost crop yields in the short term, they can have some pretty negative long-term effects on the soil.
It's like we're sacrificing long-term sustainability for those quick gains. So how do those chemicals actually harm the soil?
They can mess up the natural balance of the soil ecosystem, killing off those beneficial microbes that are so important for decomposition, nutrient cycling, even disease suppression.
So it's like we're weakening the soil's immune system,
Yeah.
making it more susceptible to diseases and less productive over time.
That's a good way to put it. And deforestation, well, that removes the protective cover of trees, which leaves the soil vulnerable to erosion.
So the soil is literally being washed away.
Exactly, taking those vital nutrients and all those microbes with it.
It's like we're losing the very foundation of our food systems.
You're right. And then you add pollution to the mix from industries, mining, even improper waste disposal that can contaminate the soil with harmful substances that can kill off those beneficial microbes and just make the soil unsuitable for growing anything.
It sounds like we need a serious wake-up call about how we treat our soil.
Mm.
What can we do to protect this precious resource to make sure it stays healthy and productive?
The good news is there's a lot we can do. For one, we need to switch to more sustainable agricultural practices.
Okay, like give me some examples.
Organic farming is a good one. It avoids using those synthetic fertilizers and pesticides that can cause so much damage. Crop rotation, where you grow different crops in sequence, helps to break those pest cycles and improve soil fertility. And cover cropping, where you plant non-cash crops between the main crops, helps prevent erosion and adds organic matter back into the soil.
It's all about working with nature, not against it.
Exactly.
And by taking care of the soil, we're taking care of our planet and ultimately ourselves.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been an amazing deep dive. I never realized just how much we rely on microbes for, well, pretty much everything, from the food we eat to the air we breathe.
It really is remarkable, isn't it? They're often overlooked, but they're essential for life on Earth.
Right. They're these invisible forces that are working all the time to keep things running smoothly.
I know. The more we learn about microbes, the more we realize how important they are, and who knows what other secrets they hold.
Exactly. This is just the beginning of our understanding of the microbial world. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the fascinating world of microbes. We hope you've enjoyed this exploration and learned something new along the way.
We sure have.
We've seen how these tiny organisms, these unseen allies, play a huge role in maintaining the health of our planet and our own well-being.
So the next time you see a patch of dirt, or enjoy a piece of cheese, or take a sip of clean water, remember those microbes working tirelessly behind the scenes.
Thanks for joining us.